Welcome, everyone. Today, we're just going to initially dive into using Arcade. So we set it up with part one, kind of the background of Arcade, how to use it, how to go find documentation if you need it, use cases, function bundles and profiles and all of that. So as I said on part one, part two will be mostly just using it and trying to show the different ways you can use it in a web map. And we will then go to, if there's time, I'll show you the basic use in ArcGIS Pro, field calculation and an attribute rule. So with that said, we're going to jump right into the demonstration. So what I want to focus on today is the new form calculations you can do in the new web map viewer. It's map viewer now, but for those of us that have been around, it is the new one. You can use the form building that is inherent in there now, that you can start to use Arcade to calculate values, write constraints, and some other, visibility that can all be running off of Arcade expressions. And so we're going to look at kind of how do you get data from other map layers to calculate values, and show you just a basic of how to set visibility or a constraint on a field in your form. Now, when we talk about forms in the web map, that is synonymous with your field maps designer, as it's newly named. When you go into field maps, if you're in the designer, you also get the same user interface of the form functionality, the form builder, the designer. And if you do this in the web map, you're going to see that in your field maps designer. So two different ways to kind of populate your field maps if that's one of your use cases that you're interested in. But it also fires in the edit widget, which I'll show you in the map, and the experience builder edit widget when you do it in the map. So very cool stuff. And we'll get to that. And then we're going to look at pop-ups, and not just basic pop-up expressions. We're going to look at how do you get data from other map layers into your pop-up? How do you use custom HTML to create, we're going to create a table in this case, and that table is going to be populated with data from another layer in the web map. And then we're going to look at a very common use case that was kind of in limbo for a while with the map viewer, the new map viewer, which is the dynamic hyperlinks that were relatively easy to construct in the map viewer classic. And now we have this new Arcade element for pop-ups that allows us to recreate workflows that maybe were kind of lost or in limbo with map viewer classic, converting to the new map viewer. So with that said, we're going to open up the demo map here, and we're going to just kind of start building out some things. So I just want to show, the first thing I'd like to show is a calculation in the edit form that is querying existing features in our same layer and populating an asset ID number. Something that comes up a lot when I help clients with Arcade calculations or calculation attribute rules. Hey, I've got all these assets, water meters, fire hydrants, in this case, trees. And when they add, when someone in the field or in the editor that we've set up adds a new asset, I would love for the ID to just be, incrementing by one. But that means that Arcade has to be able to go in, find all of your existing features, look at, find the highest number and then add one to it, right? So it sounds complicated, but hopefully showing you guys this, it'll make a little bit more sense on kind of the steps and the functions that we have in Arcade that can help us accomplish this. So I'm going to go to the forms on the right, and I'm going to configure the form for my tree inventory layer. And again, this is, if you've been in the field maps designer, it's very similar, almost identical, right? This is going to propagate into the field maps application, whatever you design here. So we have this asset ID field, and I want to assign a calculation here that is going to loop through and look at all my existing trees in the same feature layer, find the highest number, add one to it, and return it to this field. So something I preached at the end of part 1 is construct or at least save your arcade expressions in an external editor. Save them somewhere other than just in the web map. It's fine most of the time, but eventually you're going to probably run into something where it errors out or you close it and it doesn't save your changes. And then, maybe 10, 20 minutes, an hour of work that you've been messing with this is gone. So I'm going to bring over my editor here, and we're going to walk through, for the sake of time, I've already constructed this, but I want to show you how, in general, we can go in and set this up. So the first thing, when we're talking about accessing data from other layers, other sources, a lot of times we're going to need this feature set by name or some other feature set function. There's a few: feature set by relationship, feature set by portal ID, if it's not in the web map, but in this case, it's in the web map. So we can construct a feature set, which is basically the attribute table with or without the geometry of this entire layer. So in this case, the trees layer. So we're constructing a feature set by name. The global, or where the feature layer lives, in this case, is the global $map. So this is built and designed to run in this single web map. And so we're going to find a layer within the web map by using the global of $map. We're going to give it the name of our layer. And now keep in mind, if you change the layer name in the web map, this function will no longer work. So if I changed it to tree inventory instead of trees in the table of contents of my web map, this will not work. So there's a few options to use if you may or may not be changing the name, but in this case, to keep it simple, we're going to say, all right, this is the name of the layer. This is the feature set I want to create. And this is where you give it a list of the fields to return. In this specific case, I'm going to just call the asset ID field. Something I mentioned in part 1, when you're creating feature sets, the last 2 parameters here, the list of the fields and whether or not you want the geometry, are very important. You should always minimize the fields you need. Minimize the list of fields to the fields you need for this specific expression. So I only need the asset ID because all I want to do is get a list of all the asset IDs, sort it, get the highest one, and add one to it. So always be cognizant of the fields you're calling, because that is going to increase or decrease the speed and functionality of your expression. And then the last piece is we're setting to false. I do not need the geometry. I do not care about where they are. All I want is a static table. When this runs, give me the current list of asset IDs. So we're going to set that to false. When you set that to true, you automatically decrease the speed of your expression. So only call the geometry if you need it. Now, the next step, so I've got my table and my feature set of just the asset IDs. And then, if I was doing this in Excel or something, I would want to sort it by, descending by asset ID. Sort them all, give me, the highest number at the very first row. So I'm going to use the order by function, and I'm going to say order my feature set, and then the parameter I'm passing it is order by asset ID, and do it in a descending fashion. Then I'm going to go in and say, all right, now I've got this sorted list of asset IDs. Should be the first row is the highest number. So I'm going to say, use the first function and give me the first row, the first item in the sorted list. Now I can parse that first row and say, on the first row, give me the value of asset ID. And that is going to be assigned to a variable that I'm calling highest ID. So now in 4 steps, I've accessed the feature layer, I've sorted it, I've grabbed the first one, the highest value, and now I've accessed that feature's asset ID. So now I can say, all right, new ID equals the highest ID plus 1. And that's what I'm going to return back to this field. So one little thing at the end here is where you're working with the original feature. So something we don't want to happen is when I go to edit this and it already has an asset ID, I don't want to overwrite that. So we have to first check and say, hey, when I chose to start editing, was the original features asset ID at the time I started editing, was it greater than 0? In this case, you could add different checks or a different evaluation, but I know if it's greater than 0, then it already has one. And then if it did already have one, just return that same ID to this edit form. If not, then by default, I'm going to assume that it needs a new ID. I'm editing a new feature, or I'm editing a feature that doesn't have one, and I want to return this new ID. So I'm going to grab this. I'm going to copy and paste, and you can see it's saved as a JavaScript file. So that will always help if you have an editor like this to kind of give you the visual feedback that you get. And I'm going to say, all right, now put this in here. And I'm going to say new expression. And here's my editor. Give it a name and say new asset ID. And I'm going to paste this. And we're going to test it. And we're going to see that the highest ID value is, so the new ID would be 1. So if I go back and I say, all right, so it ran. Now I want to go in and say, all right, now I'm going to test it. So I'm going to go in and start editing here and say, all right, open my, where's my edit widget? And I'm going to drop a new tree in here. And I would expect that the asset ID would populate with the number 5. So if I, these are the only 4 assets I have in this layer right now. And the numbers are, what you would think 1, 2, 3, 4. So if I add 1, then now I have the number 5. So very cool use case, something that hopefully many of you have wondered if it's possible or tried to set up, or maybe you already have one. But this is like one of the most popular use cases I see in our line of, the local government and some other sectors of keeping asset IDs concurrent, building on a number. So just one of the really cool use cases. And then another one that comes up a lot is, how do I calculate? So if I look at, I'm going to actually bail out of this. If I look at the attribute table, I have, if I look at my pop-up, if I get out of this, if I click on one of these, why can't I click? There we go. Oh, gotta just, okay. So I have a latitude and longitude field in my data. So how do I calculate that on the fly? Somebody drops a new point in the field. I want that to automatically calculate. And for the sake of time, I've already gone in and put this together, but this one's a little bit tricky because you have to do some conversion on the fly. But if I scroll down here, I'm going to show you that for longitude, I'm going to, well, for latitude, that already has one. If I go in here and I look at this expression I have called calculate latitude, I have a function that I did not make. Someone else made this. I found it on the Esri community. It's far beyond my level of knowledge on how to convert meters to latitude, longitude, but it works. And a good example of, you don't have to reinvent the wheel here. Go search Google, go search Esri community if you want some help, or you want to maybe take a look and see if someone's already done something you're interested in. I do always put the source in here when I find these somewhere else so I can go back and look. But somebody on Esri community put this on there and said, hey, this is where I got this function. So anyway, the function meters to lat long will take your current geometry of the feature and we'll do the calculations as needed. And then it's going to return a list of the latitude and the longitude. And I'm rounding these to 6 decimals. Now, because I'm returning an array, a list of latitude and longitude, I can say, all right, now the variable latitude is the function output, the first item here, item 0. And then the latitude is meters to lat long, the output, item 1. And for this, because it's latitude field, I'm saying, all right, return the latitude. Now you could just put in here, you just want this. You could have this function separately, just return this. But when we're working with latitude and longitude fields, I commonly just use the same function. So I'm going to copy this. And now I have a longitude field. And this is where someday we might be able to use these in a different way in the map viewer where you could just have one. But for this case, I'm going to show you how you can just quickly say, all right, new, and I'm going to paste this. And because now I'm on the longitude field, I'm just going to return one word here and say return longitude. And longitude, that's not spelled right, but it's okay. And now I have functions that are running that are calculating the latitude and longitude when I move or add a new feature. So another very common use case and something that you can find, that was an Esri article, a blog post, I think, that was on there, and I can add a reference to that. But all right, so for the sake of time, we're moving fast, but now we've looked at how do we access data in the same feature layer. How do we calculate latitude and longitude? And now we're going to look at how do I access data from another feature layer that's in my map. So as you saw, we worked through the first function. You can use the global and create a feature set using the $map, and then you have access to the layers in your web map. So I'm going to get out of this. Yeah, sure, that's fine. And in my parcel layer, I want to query the trees that are in the parcel and do something. So this is where on my pop-up, I might see something that says, hey, a client might say, how do I get a summary of the trees that are in each parcel? When I click on the parcel, I would love to know either just a basic, there's 4 trees in this parcel, there's 1 tree in this parcel, or maybe an advanced use is, I would love a table that summarizes by species, there's 2 of this, 1 of these, and total there's 4. So let's use this use case as an example and show you how to access data from other feature layers or other layers in your web map. So now I'm going to go into the pop-up editor. So we're jumping from the form editor, the edit form, to the pop-up now. And we're going to go into pop-ups, and we have something new for the map viewer is this arcade item that you can add to your pop-up. Now you can still use our attribute expressions for those of us that are comfortable and have been using that for a while. Makes a lot of sense. The one thing that it doesn't do is HTML. So keep that in mind. That's why this new arcade item is so popular and useful and awesome. But if we want to just add an attribute expression to get something simple, like how many of the trees are in each parcel, I'm going to go back here to what I've saved for this, and we're going to say parcel tree count, and no. And I have a very basic function here. I'm getting the feature set by name. So again, feature set by name, I'm using the map global, and I'm looking at trees, and I'm getting to the global ID field. I just want a count of the global IDs. And then I'm going to, I'm sorry, I just want the global IDs. I need some attribute, global ID is fine. Then I'm running an intersect of how many trees intersect the current feature. In this case, that current feature is the parcel. And then I'm saying, all right, return the count of intersections. So if I copy and paste this into my attribute expression, we're going to run this and see, all right, so this one has 0. So I can say trees in parcel, say done. Now, if I add this to my field list, I will see, oh, there it is. So now in this parcel, we can see here, there are 4 trees. So I've added a dynamic variable using arcade to my pop-up expression. It's counting the trees. If I click on this one, there's 0. We would expect to see 0. So just a quick, hey, how do I get a count of something from another layer? Now, another use case, and what I alluded to, is using this arcade expression, this arcade element, and going in, and if I can, oh, sorry, I'm in the field list. That's not where I want to be. Now, if I go to edit expression, so I just returned something to keep me, give me a reminder, but what I want to show you, and I'm not going to go through this one because we're running out of time, but if you have questions or want to, I'll make this map public so you guys can see it, but let's see, tree count, summary table. All right, I'm gonna quickly populate this into my arcade expression. So when you this arcade element is great because you can do HTML formatting. So you can see I'm returning text and I have a variable called HTML that is dynamically creating, this is a lot of HTML, but it's dynamically creating a table based on what's in the parcel. So I'm going to say tree summary. And now if I run this and I click on this parcel, so you can see this is kind of the advanced use, but I'm dynamically creating a table by accessing what is the features that are intersecting this parcel. I'm looping through those features, in this case, the 4 trees. I'm sorting them or aggregating them by species and getting the total count. I'm returning that in a table that I'm saying, give me the common name and give me the number of trees. And then at the very bottom, give me the total number of trees in a parcel. So just some really cool stuff. And, we're running out of time here, but it's one of those awesome things you can do, really spice up your pop-up if you want to get creative and make some cool custom pop-ups. So in reality, I would probably, this is where I would start to make a custom pop-up all on its own, and I would delete the field list, and that is what you would see. You can add in feature attributes like you would see in the normal field list into this, but just a cool use case for the arcade element in the pop-up. So with that said, we have one last thing I wanted to cover in this web map, which is dynamic URLs, hyperlinks. So I'm going to again add this arcade element, and I'm going to call this, I have a, let's see, tree report. I have in an Amazon S3 bucket, I have a set of reports that someone has given me, PDF reports that I would love to hyperlink to based on the asset ID of a tree. So if I go back in here and look at somewhere, here we go. Nope. I want to, here we go. So again, save these somewhere other than the map. You will save yourself a lot of headache and frustration at some point if you don't just leave these and construct them in the map. It's fine constructing them in here, but always be saving them somewhere else as you're building them. This editor here is great for, we showed this in part 1, the built-in functionality and checking and the console and all that stuff, but save it somewhere else. So one common thing that was left is the ability to use HTML. So to create a hyperlink, so I'm creating an anchor tag with an href of a base URL, and then I'm bringing in a piece of that URL to be my current features asset name, and I'm going to return that as a hyperlink. So now, if tree-1 corresponded to something in my S3 bucket or your OneDrive or whatever your file share, now you've quickly created a hyperlink that will allow the user to click a tree and then go find its corresponding document folder or a PDF document in this case. So just a really cool thing. And with that, I've got 4 minutes left. So I was going to show, if we jump into Pro with a few minutes here, I didn't want to leave out that arcade can be used, these expressions can be used in, if I just open this, in the field calculator. Most of you probably are aware of that. It's now, it's been around for a long time, but you can see here that I have the same type of function here where I'm looking for data from another, feature class. In this case, I want my hydrant to populate with data from the nearest address point. So if I pull this out and say, I want to calculate my field, and let's see if I can just open this real quick. Hydrants. So the same thing, just like we were doing in the web map, I want to calculate the address field. I'm just going to copy and paste this. Oh, look, it's already there. I love that Pro does that now. I'm going to pull this in here and say, all right, I want to get rid of this. So I'm doing the same thing, except now I'm using the data store to get my feature set, which is like the geo database. I'm saying, look at the address training data layer, give me the address field. And then I'm saying buffer my hydrant by 50 feet, find the intersecting address points, one or more. And if there's one or more, return me the first one. Now you can get advanced and say, loop through a function that finds the closest based on distance. But in this case, I just want to return the first one that it hits. So in this case, we're looking at this feature here. We're going to assume it's probably 115 West Front Street. So let me just say, okay. And it's going to create a buffer and find that 115 West Front Street was the first one that it hit, and it returns that feature's address value. So I'm out of time, but that can also be, I want to show that these same functions are also available and can be used in ArcGIS Pro on your feature layers in a geodatabase or what have you, just like we were doing in the web map. So sorry if there's questions and I didn't leave time. But...
We're good. We're good. We got one here. I think we can do real quick. So the arcade element, does that take the place of attribute expressions in text?
No. I mean, it can. So that's a great question. It can be anything and everything you want it to be. So the arcade element can do what your attribute expression is doing. But one cool thing about the attribute expression that we saw in the parcels is that if you have the standard field list, oh, I deleted the field list, but if you have the field list here, we'll just restart that. It can be right there in your field list as a field, right? So some people like that. It's what they're used to. It's right there. You can put it as the first field you see. And I think we did that in part 1. We moved a custom attribute expression to the top. Arcade can send back text. So when you go to add content here, you're seeing field list, charts, images, text, and arcade. It can do all of that. The arcade element can give you all of these things by itself. I would caution that, if you just need something simple, use the other elements. But yes, it in theory could replace. It's not going to. Obviously, these are still around, but yes, the arcade element and the pop-up can do what all of those other pre-built things can do.